it so much that he asked the monks if he could stay and be there all the time. Well, they were amazed. They hadn't heard of such a thing for so long. But of course they welcomed him in, and the next month 2 more did the same. Well, by this time everyone was hearing about the monastery and how nice it was, and they came visiting and exploring, and bit by bit more people joined. And within a few years, the monastery was growing and growing until it finally became great again. It was astounding, and all because of the rabbi's gift.
Oh,
Thank you.
that is just marvelous, Tim. I don't know why you haven't told that in a while. I think you should tell it daily to most of the people that I know. Right now I'll just say welcome to Lona and Michelle and Victoria, and ask for anybody has some comments for Tim. Be sure to unmute yourself so that we can hear you. Harvey?
Oh, it was a wonderful story. I love Cedric. Yes, it's very powerful. The way you told it, was very well said. I really enjoyed it.
I would call that, this is Beatrice. What? Oh, am I mute?
Nope, you are. We can hear you.
Okay. I would call that a tour de force. It was simply perfect. And it gave me new faith in why we love storytelling. That was so good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that, my friends, is the Timothy Shepherd's gift.
I agree.
Any other comments or feedback? I see your hand, Bea. Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to say what I particularly like is how simply it was told, and how the story started so gently and slowly, and then it kind of captured me. It was like being captured by a vine, so just slowly, all out like a spider thread. And then we got to the strength of it. But it was beautiful. I really loved that. This old man walking into the forest. Oh yeah, it's all right. I loved that tempo of it. I thought the tempo was brilliant. So thank you, Tim.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Bea. Chris, you had a comment?
I agree with everyone. It was lovely, particularly on a Sunday morning. I wonder though, would it be possible to reverse the religions? Use different religions altogether? Because I don't think it's Christian, Jewish specific. Does that make sense?
Well, no, quite. I mean, that's how I heard it. It's
yeah.
But yes, I mean, it could be changed.
Yeah, Jim, I wondered at your reaction to it.
Well, that view of Messiah is a particularly Christian one, so I don't know that you could substitute other the rabbi could be any religion, but for example, that was not the Jewish notion of Messiah, so it wouldn't work in the opposite direction.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Steve,
on the other hand,
thank you. Steve has a comment now, please.
Yeah. On the other hand, I would suggest that everybody can relate to that moment where you go, oh no, is it me? Is this all there is?
I must admit, thank you, Steve, that one of the things that I thought was a very strong point was and I think others have mentioned this, is you have a very conversational style. It's not overly dramatized, and it gives me as an audience member a sense of confidence that you're going to take me someplace that I really will end up want to be going to. because you have a certain confidence and a sense of security that radiates through that. I'm just telling you a story. So thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting. Yeah.
Do we have any other comments before I tag Harvey? Because Harvey is going to be our next teller. Yeah, no? Well, thank you, Tim, then enormously, and I hope to see you on screen again and again and again and again and again.
Well, that reminds me of the story.
Well, thank you. Harvey, may we hear from you now? And yes, if you check your chat screen, it's been, Steve was kind enough to note that if you mute yourself, like me, I have a phone ringing. If you mute yourself while someone is telling, then there's less background noise and it makes it easier. Also, if you want to see the teller close up and personal, then right click on that person's video screen and select pin video. That will make that person's video the center of attention. Harvey, I'm going to make you the center of attention now. Tell us a story.
So, well, under normal circumstances, I would ask you to talk along with me as the giant speaks, but we can't do that in a virtual and actually have everyone talking at the same time. So stay muted. You can mouth the words if you'd like to. Okay. This is a story by Aaron Shepard. It goes like this. There once was a wise man. Now, no one knew how wise he was, and he was very old. He was so old that no one knew his name. In fact, he didn't know his name, so he was just referred to as the Wise One. Now, the Wise One lived in a kingdom where he was right near the capital city. The city was named Here. And about a day's journey away on a single road from here was the city of There. Now, many travelers went by horse and cart and foot from here to there and back again. Well, one day, a merchant traveled from here, but only got as far as halfway when standing in the middle of the road stood a giant. The giant looked at him and said, "None shall pass without a fight. Choose your weapon, dark or light. I'll more than match you, wrong or right." The merchant said, "No thanks." And he went back to here, telling her, "Hope, there's a giant in the middle of the road. Jim, there's a giant in the middle of the road. Nancy, there's a giant in the middle of the road." Until word got to the king. The king said, dear me, what shall I do?" The queen said, "Darling, why don't you just..." "No, not now. I must ask my counselors 3. They will give me my advice." Well, the first counselor came. He pointed his finger and says, "Your Majesty, you must protect the pathways for our citizens. I suggest you send one of your warriors, one of your strong ones. I suggest you send the master of clubs." "Oh my," said the king. But the order was given, and the master of clubs rode out until he came to the middle of the road. And there, standing in the middle of the road, was the giant, dressed just like a master of clubs. "None shall pass without a fight. Choose your weapon, dark or light. I'll more than match you, wrong or right." Well, the brawny man got off his horse, and said, "I choose clubs." And he pulled out a club. And the giant, he pulled out a bigger club and went, whomp, whomp, whomp. Well, the master was now much shorter and much wider. And the flattened man went back to the king. And the king said, dear me, what shall I do?" darling, why don't you? No, no, my second counselor wouldn't give me my advice. The second counselor came. He tugged on his ear and he said, Your Majesty, this is an insult and should not go unanswered. You must send the master of swords. Oh my, oh my. But the order was given, and the master of swords rode out till he got to the middle of the road. And there, standing in the middle of the road, was the giant, dressed just like a master of swords. None shall pass without a fight. Choose your weapon, dark or light. I'll more than match you, wrong or right. The lanky man got off his horse and said, I choose swords. And he pulled out his blade. But the giant pulled out a sword that was longer and sharper, and swish, swish, swish. And the master of swords' shirt was totally shattered and shredded. Well, the tattered man went back to the king. And the king said, dear me, what shall I do? And the queen said, darling, why don't you just... No, my third counselor will tell me. Well, the third counselor came, and he said, Your Majesty, you must send your fiercest warrior. This is a danger to our kingdom and must be dealt with. I suggest you send the master of fire. Oh my, said the king. But the order was given, and the master of fire rode out till he came to the middle of the road. And there was the giant, dressed just like the master of fire, saying, None shall pass without a fight. Choose your weapon, dark or light. I'll more than match you, wrong or right. And the ruddy man got off his horse and said, I choose fire. And he lit his torch and he threw it at the giant. And the giant caught it and it became brighter and bigger. And he threw it back. And it wasn't long before the master of fire was totally scorched. Well, the smoldering man went back to the king. And the king said, Dear me, what shall I do? And the queen said, darling, why don't you just ask the wise one? The wise one! Oh, what a wonderful idea! I'm so glad we came up with it. And he called to the wise one. And he told the wise one the whole story and everything that happened. And the wise one said, I will take care of it immediately. And the king loaned him a horse and a cart, and the wise one rode out till he got to the middle of the road. And there stood the giant, dressed just like a wise one. None shall pass without a fight. Choose your weapon, dark or light. I'll more than match you, wrong or right. I'll have to think about that, said the wise one. And he sat down to ponder. The giant just stood still in the middle of the road. It wasn't long before the wise one's stomach began to grumble. And we all know what happens when your stomach is grumbling. You're hungry. So he went and took out from his sack a piece of bread, and as he was about to eat it, the giant's stomach began to grumble. And the wise one said, Oh, you seem to be hungry too. Might I share a bit of bread with you? What? You challenge me to kindness? No, I'll match you more than that. And the giant pulled out from his bag a giant table filled with all sorts of pastries and breads and cheeses, and went back to the middle of the road and stood. I see. So that's the way of it. Well, the wise man sat down and he started eating until he had his fill plus a little more. But then he said while he was eating, why don't I tell you a little bit about myself? I live in a town called here, right outside the capital of the kingdom, and though I make no claim to myself, they call me the wise one. What? Another challenge? I'll match you. I'll tell you more about me. I have no name for my father. It was the wind. And my mother, she's just a curved mirror that can only reflect what happens, which is why I can only reflect back what people show me. I have nothing that I can bring to myself. I thought that might be the case. Well, I must be off to there. Can I offer you a ride? Another challenge? No, I will offer you a ride. And he picked up the wise one and the horse and the cart, took them all the way to there and put them down. I hope you finally learned your lesson, said the giant. Oh, yes, I believe I have. And I'm sure the king and people will appreciate the lesson I learned. And the giant disappeared like the wind back to the middle of the road. And from that day forth, it never took a day to go from here to there or back again. All the people had to do was go halfway and offer a ride to the giant. And he took the rest of the way. More Than a Match by Aaron Shepard.
Bravo.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. One of my favorite stories, and you tell it so well. How about some comments? Any reactions or thoughts? Yes, Steve, you need to. Good.
Yes, I love the voices and the fact that they're so spare. Each character came out very clearly, but you just changed a little bit, and each character came out so clearly with just that very spare, little accent here or a little change in tone, and that's a beautiful way to tell stories.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
I
Yes,
love
Beatrice.
the repetition of, I love the repetition of the chant. That was so effective. So now we've had two heart-opening and mind-blowing stories in a row. It's very exciting. A Sunday morning and Father's Day. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. When I tell that with kids, once they've learned that part, towards the end, I don't have to say it, and I don't. I let them be the ones that say it.
Wonderful.
And I also noticed, just for a point, I tried that with really young kids, and before I tell the story, I have them just stand up and mirror me. So I have them all stand up and mirror what I'm doing, so that the idea of what's going to happen, and then I tell the story.
Nice.
That's a great touch. I like that. That's good. I hadn't heard that particular story with the addition of the fact that the giant was clothed in the same outfit as the challenging warrior. I think it's brilliant.
I actually forgot to do the merchant, because he's dressed as a merchant the first time the merchant season.
Yes, I kind of wondered, but I think it's terrific. Pat Neese, what did you think? I've unmuted you.
Yeah, and I did something crazy. I was trying to increase my sound, and I completely lost everything, but I managed to get back. I thought it was great, and it may have just been the way I saw it, but when he was speaking, or his wife was speaking to him, she was on his left, but it seemed like he answered her on the right, which just threw me off a little. I love the story. Do you know what I'm saying? That when the speaker is here and you're hearing her, but then you answered her looking the other way. I thought that was, other than that, and I thought the story was fantastic.
For me, he was pushing her off. He's saying, no, don't talk to me now, because I want to listen to someone else. But you're right, I could do it that way also.
Yeah, if she's talking there, then I would have.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
That's a good point, Pat. It really talks about, addresses the fact that we need to be consistent in how we represent our characters and their orientation in space. And I can see that you were pushing away. Lona, you had a comment. You look like you've been under the weather, my dear. I guess that was a yes.
Yes, they gave me medicine.
Yay!
with directions. So, but you said you left out the merchant.
Can't,
That
can't hear.
that actually shows how you can shorten or lengthen that story
I'm having trouble hearing.
very easily. You can't hear me?
There, yeah,
No,
you were.
she's like
Let's
too far away.
try it again.
Yes, no?
Yes, it's just very low. Talk closer to the mic, I guess.
I don't-
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I just got back from urgent care. You said you left out the merchant.
Yeah, the giant should have been dressed like a merchant. I realized that after I went.
But by doing things like that, it shows you how you can lengthen and shorten a story. It makes
Yeah.
you know that there are things that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There are ways of lengthening and shortening your story.
Sure. Thank you.
That's a very good point, because we are often challenged to be very flexible with our length of stories and what pieces we put in and remove depending upon the age and the number of our audience and so on and so forth. I'm going to ask if Victoria Phelps can hear us and if we can hear her. I'm going to unmute her. Victoria, can you hear us?
She's still muted.
I know, I keep trying to unmute her and I think,
Okay.
there you are.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear us?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear
Okay.
you.
Just wanted to make sure, since we do not have your video feed, so we can't see your face.
I know. I don't have a camera. Right.
Well, that's okay. We allow the fact that you probably still do exist anyway.
You never know.
Ah.
They do exist.
So
Okay.
Victoria, what did you think of Barbie's story?
It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. I could see where it's very interactive. If I had one refinement just to offer, if you want, when you do the repetition, for me, I would like to hear just a little bit of voice variation. So I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but what's the repetition? Anyway, you can just play with it. It just seemed like it was kind of on the same tone, which was great. But if you wanted to play with it, you could give it just a little bit variation on that chant. That was just my thought, but it was wonderful. It was nice.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and I appreciate you pointing out that. And there again, it may be with different audiences that the voice we would choose more voice variation or less, depending on, like, you might not. It depends on how old your children in your audience were, how large and scary you would make the giant. I don't know.
Well, the other thing that you got to be careful of is the words you use in terms of the audience. And I'm not talking in terms of being too sophisticated. It's idioms you might use that they might know. Originally, when I told the story to first graders, I didn't say, "Can I offer you a ride?" I said, "Can I offer you a lift?" They had no idea what that meant. They thought that it was the giant lifting. So I since refined the story. So I don't use that because young kids may not know that anymore. Now, if you offer someone a lift, it's not an Uber, So.
I think that's really a good point. I like that. Yes, Chris, I see that finger, which tells me you have something to say.
Banu had a comment.
Oh, Banu.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Harvey, thank you for the story. I thoroughly enjoyed the story. I like the best the repetition, as the others mentioned. It made me to come along with the story. So I like that part. And second thing is, as you mentioned, you had told this story to a young audience, right? So
Yeah.
how old were they? Like, what was your minimum age group, and how was the response? Like, this is a very good audience participative interactive story.
Oh, they love the script. Whoever I told it to, it's been okay. The youngest I've told it to, I think, were, for us, first and second graders, which would have been 6 or 7 year olds.
Great. Okay.
And actually, Aaron Shepard in his writing
Good.
of the
Thank
story
you.
suggested ages 5 through 12 and adults. So, but again, the younger they are, you got to give them the mirror thing first, otherwise they don't understand.
And that is a really, really good point. Thank you so much. And thank you, Banu. I'm going to put the focus now on our friend Jim Brule, who has brought us a story today, too. Jim, tell us a story.
Okay. Let me set my timer here. Okay. Thank you. My story today is a story by Mitchell Heffitz called The Queen of Patience, and I tell it with his permission. There once was a queen who ruled over a land with great patience and harmony. The winds blew in their season, the rains fell as they should, the sun rose and set along with the seasons and her times. In fact, even the people got along. It was an amazing land. And it was so full of harmony because the queen's heart was full of harmony. And it just broadcast itself out to all of her subjects. Now, despite the fact of how harmonious this whole place was, the queen felt a yearning in her heart that she couldn't describe. She didn't know exactly what it was she was yearning for, but she knew that something was missing. So she thought and she considered and she decided that perhaps she would learn to sing. Maybe it was singing that she was missing. And so she went off with great effort and she studied all she could study first about music and composition and style and genre, and then about how the throat works and how the vocal cords works. She studied for years and years to try and become the best singer she could. In fact, she even built a huge auditorium where she could sing to her subjects when she was ready. And when that day arrived and all of her subjects crowded into the auditorium, she stepped out on the stage and the first music emerged from her lips and the people swooned. She sang the most beautiful melody, and when she finished, they rose to their feet in great applause. Encouraged, she sang another song, and the people responded even more powerfully. They loved her so much. It was by the fourth song that she realized that she didn't know if she was any good, that the reaction she was getting from her subjects was due to their love of her, not of her music. And so she felt actually disappointed. She decided she would try something else. And she she thought maybe this time I'll try dance. And so once again, she threw herself into a great study of dance, of anatomy and choreography and staging. And years later, she appeared at the stage ready to perform her first dance. And as she stepped out from behind the curtain, her foot just coming into view, the crowd erupted into applause. And she knew before she began that she would never know if she was any good because they loved her so much. But still, she felt that yearning and she decided she would try something yet again. And this time she decided, well, maybe if it's not about me, maybe I'll build something, I'll sculpt something. And the idea came to her to blow some glass. And so once again, she went out and she studied physics and heat and sand and artistry and all the dynamics of shape until finally, years later, she had crafted this beautiful, beautiful globe. The globe shimmered around its edges. It seemed to weave a little in and out of itself, and she had it placed on a pedestal in the center of this great auditorium. And when the people had assembled, she drew back the curtain, and the people cheered. They loved it, and they cheered so much and with so much feeling that the globe shattered. Now, the people were horrified. They'd broken the queen's globe, but she was thrilled. I mean, she could improve. It was a great gift to her. So she went off and she studied some more, and she decided she would make an even more beautiful globe and a stronger globe and a resilient globe. And she did. She built this beautiful, beautiful globe. And this time it actually did twist and turn, and it seemed to be lit from within. It was just an amazing piece of work. She set it up again when it was ready on the pillar, and people came, curtains drew back, and there was a deadly silence. For of course the people knew that the last time they had broken her globe, so they stood there silently. But it wasn't long before a murmur arose, and finally a gasp and a cheer, and again they cheered so loud that the globe again shattered. The people were even more horrified than they were before, and the queen was even more exhilarated. She was going to be able to improve again. And this time, years passed as she perfected her craft and her vision. And finally, the day arrived, and she put the globe up on its pedestal. This time, fire swirled around inside, little sparks dancing from place to place inside the globe. She drew back the curtain, and it was a dead silence because no one had come. They decided that they couldn't risk shattering the queen's great work. The queen noticed that no one was there, and she sat on the floor. No one was going to be able to appreciate this, and her yearning seemed to grow even more strong. And as she felt that yearning rise within her heart, she saw the globe begin to glow more and more. And the more her yearning grew, the more the globe grew bright and back and forth until again the globe shattered. Pieces flying throughout the room. Each little shard landing in a place with a little bit of that spark of light that had been dancing in it only a moment before. As the globe shattered, she cried out. It was ruined, and she didn't know what she would be able to do now. She looked down on the floor, and there were all those shards of glass. And she looked at one in particular, and it seemed to shift and wriggle and slide. And it moved over, and it touched another shard. And the little bit of light in the first shard merged with the light in the second, and it flew out, and she felt a little bit of pleasure. And sure enough, over there was another one. The little shard of glass was sliding around. It bumped into another one, and she felt another bit of pleasure. And soon enough, she was looking all around, and everywhere, two shards of glass were coming together and joining in this burst of pleasure. She sat on the floor watching this, and she sits there still. That's it.
Oh, Jim, you did it again. This is turning into quite an extraordinary gathering. I think we will all be walking about 18 inches off the floor when we leave this group, because there are so many wonderful ideas and images floating around. Any comments about Jim's story? Well, I guess that's
just a little bit of background.
Please.
Just so you know, this was Hefitz's attempt to retell the Lurianic story of creation, in which God withdraws from the universe and explodes out and embeds God's self into each of us. and our duty is to find God in each other and join together. So this is his retelling of that Lurianic tale.
I must admit that my first association, Jim, was Tikkun Olam.
Yeah.
Chris, you had a comment.
What a pairing of your story and Tim's. I was glued, absolutely glued. You invested so much in how the Queen felt and her relationship with her people. It was just, it's a stunning story. Thank you.
Yes, Beatrice.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris.
Another great, great story, well told. I only wanted one tiny bit of information. The emotional underpinning of the Queen. Well, I needed to know, why was it a song and dance that drew her? What had happened to her for the emptiness inside? Because that leap off that bridge from empty, powerful but empty, to starting toward fulfillment, trying everything, that's brilliant. But I wanted there to be some little link, like she heard a bird sing and suddenly it gave her just one shred of hint, period. Otherwise, nothing but praise.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Beatrice. And welcome, Maria. It's good to see your face on the screen as well. And let's see, Michelle, you have a comment?
I just love the, I don't know, simplicity, but he kept me in the same place. So it didn't have me going to different places. Sometimes I find that if someone sends me in many places, that it's hard to keep track. So I appreciate the consistency and letting the space be within the story instead of trying to drive me to different places. So thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. What an interesting comment, and I think we'll all be enjoying that one because that's a nice perspective. Thank you. I like that. How about you, Rebecca? What did you think of the story?
I'm just enjoying this so much. The three stories, I think, starting with Tim's and then it seems like it's paired with Jim's, as Chris said, but then Harvey's is sort of also that mirroring, and I don't know, I'm just really enjoying it. I just love the gentle tone, and I just feel there's so much in that story that I'll probably need a year or two to sort of I'll probably be remembering it in a long time and sort of getting things, little by little, that story. And yeah, I just feel it's so packed that, I wasn't really paying attention to the performance. I was just really in the story, and so no real feedback for the storytelling aspect, but just, I'm just being transported by these stories and really enjoying them a lot. So thank you. Yeah.
And thank you for being here, Rebecca. It's nice to have you included. And I think that we seem to be resonating here with a very delicate but rich touch of this power of storytelling to really make many, many little tiny transformations through our lives. That being said, we have another.
The theme really lends itself to these amazing stories, doesn't it? It's an amazing theme.
Tim had a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, I really liked it. Thank you. But I kind of, it was a very personal thing. But as soon as you mentioned the word shards, I suddenly clicked. And thought, now I see what this is. But that's because I knew that story, and the creation story there. It is so beautiful, so profound, and So it was really nice to hear it in a completely different form. And it kind of made it much more experiential and real, something that is basically a very abstract and very profound story, which is kind of hard to feel your way into otherwise. So it became a real experience instead. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll comment. This is from a collection of stories that he wrote. And some of them are original and some of them are kind of recasting of these. He calls this his least favorite of the batch.
Oh, no.
It's interesting to me because I love to tell it. Yeah.
Yes, Beatrice.
That sounds promising.
We'll take one more comment from Beatrice, and then I'll be calling on Bea.
That just woke up an image that I've run into, and I'm sure we all have, of the two sides of something coming together, either in the shape of a heart or a butterfly, which are both symbols of the soul. And it seemed, I don't know if it would be too much to add anything. It's pretty perfect the way it is, but there was something about their flight, the two shards, and I pictured these hearts flying into the universe. Anyway, it's simply brilliant. Thank you.
And on that note, I am going to put Bea on the spot. You certainly have an eager audience. Please tell us a story,
Hello,
Bea.
everyone.
Bea is coming to us from Ireland.
It's a story, it's the oldest story that has ever been written down. And it is also the story of a queen. It was a beautiful morning. One of those mornings when you wake up and your heart is fluttering with joy, when the sky is blue and the sun is shining and the sparkling sea is doing its sparkling things. And when Inanna woke up, she was rested, she had slept well, and she stepped out of her bed, and suddenly she thought, there's something wrong, I don't understand what's going on. There's a strange noise coming from down below. And then it seemed to fade. So she stepped into her beautiful silk shift and she tied her golden sandals to her ankles, and her maid helped her to dress her hair, and she put her beautiful crown made of the moon crescent. And then she stopped again, and she thought, no, there is a noise. There's this terrible noise coming from somewhere. And she stepped down the stairs in her castle. And she went down and down and down, and she went to the ground floor, and the noise was getting louder. And something at the back of her mind, something really puzzled her and confused her, and the cries got louder, and the beautiful day got all messed up, and she thought, I need to do something about this. What is going on? And she said to her maid, she said to her servant, she said, I'm going down into the underworld. I'm going to check out what's going on. And the maid said, my lady, you can't go. You're the queen of heaven. You're the great Inanna. You're the queen of the moon. You are the queen of light. The queen of light cannot go into the underworld. But I have to go, said Inanna. I have realized who it is that's crying. It's my sister, Inishkagar, the goddess of the darkness, the goddess of the moon, of the morning, the goddess of the depths, of the roots of the earth. I need to find out what's wrong with her. I have to go. And she draped herself into her beautiful midnight blue velvet cloak. And the servant was crying when she opened the door into the underworld and started stepping down. The servant said, my lady, I'm hanging onto your cloak here. You mustn't go. Oh, said Inanna, for goodness sake, pull yourself together, child. Of course I'm going. Do what you're told. I'm a goddess. No, please don't go. Okay, tell you what we'll do. If I'm not back in 7 days, you can go and get some help. I'm sure I'll be fine. Okay, dear? And she draped herself into her cloak and started stepping down, and she found herself at the first gate of the underworld. And there was this giant there with his arms crossed like that, and he said, what do you want? And Inanna said, excuse me, I'm Inanna, the great goddess. I want to come down. And the giant said, I don't care who you are. The only way you can come through this gate is by giving something of yourself. And she did. She gave her cloak. made of the midnight sky, and dropped it on the floor. And the giant, he opened the door. And there were 7 gates, ladies and gentlemen. And at each gate, the giant who was guarding the gate refused to recognize the great goddess Inanna. And at each time, she had to give up everything that made her who she was, until at the last gate, she stood naked. Now you have to imagine that she has lost everything. She's there, standing there naked. The noise of the groaning, the crying, the tearing of the hair is horrific. And as she walks through the last gate, she runs towards her sister and she looks at this horrendous spectacle. She's torn her hair out. There's blood everywhere. She's aghast. She says, "Sister, what is wrong with you?" And in Ishkagar, in her grief and her madness, turns onto her, grabs her by the throat, smashes her against the wall, and kills her. And she hangs her body on a hook on the wall. A day passes, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. The servant is beside herself. Her mistress has not returned. What has happened to the great Inanna? So she goes and gets some help. But you see, the problem is, when the goddess of the light goes into the darkness, everybody else goes, "Yeah, no, I can't help you. That problem." She chose to go into the dark. She chose to go and talk to Inishgar. "So we're not helping you." And she goes to the king of the gods. She goes to all the gods, and they're not doing it. Until she gets to Loki, the god of the tricksters, the Ganesh of the ancient times. And she says, "Please help me, my lord. Please help me, your favorite sister." And he goes, "Okay, I'll help you." And out of a piece of bread, he fashions 2 little people, imps, and he gives them to her in her hand, and he says, "Take them to the door of the underworld and let them free." And she does. Terrified she is, and she drops them off at the door of the underworld. And of course, the giants can't see them, can they? Because they're tiny. And they run, and go through all the 7 gates to find themselves horrified at the bottom, because Erishkigal has not stopped crying. The blood is seeping through the walls, and when they look up to the wall opposite, they see the corpse of Inanna hanging. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to get out of this. And then suddenly they have an idea. And she sees them, Erishkigal sees them and tries to catch them, but they're so tiny, they keep escaping. And they run and they run and they run and they run. They make faces at her and they make grimaces at her. And in the end, she starts laughing. And as she awakes for her terrible grief, she looks around her as the laughter dies. She realizes she's killed her sister. Her anger and her grief was so strong. And she doesn't know what to do. And she's so sorry. She didn't mean to kill her. She was just annoyed and jealous and upset because her husband had died. And she says to the imp, "What shall we do?" And the imps say, "It's okay. We have the power to bring her back." So they do. And there's Inanna, naked, in front of her sister. And they embrace. And Inanna says, "I'm really sorry. I forgot all about you. I was so busy in my world of light with my beautiful sun, my glorious sparkling sea, my magnificent blue sky, that I forgot to honor you, sister. This will not happen again." And then she started to come back up the stairs. And in the first gate, she picked up a silken shift. But you know, the funny thing was that even though it was exactly the same garment, it was never quite the same again. And this went at every gate. when she picked up whatever she'd left behind, it still felt slightly different. And finally, when she put upon herself the beautiful cloak made of the midnight sky, she had understood something that very few of us understand. And even though she was exactly the same, she was different forevermore. And this story is 5,000 years old. Blessed be.
Blessed be. Thank you, Bea. What an amazing adaptation of the Inanna story. I will be fascinated to hear everyone's comments. Thank you for bringing it to us today. Comments?
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Come on, Kurt. Comments from you, Kurt.
Absolutely. This was, I completely agree with Hope. It was an excellent adaptation of the Inanna myth. I love underworld stories, and I really thought that you captured this one so beautifully. The whole connection between the light and the dark and her descending down and the arguments against it, it just flowed so beautifully. And I've always had this wonderful image in my mind of what it's like for the Queen of Light to be descending through all these levels and finally stand before her mad sister, basically stripped of all of that she has achieved in the light. I loved it. I thought you did a really super job. And I thank you for sharing it.
Thank you, Kurt. How about you, Chris? What did you think? Then I'll come over to Harvey.
I don't know the story. So this was the first time I, excuse me, heard it. And it was shocking because I didn't know what was coming. Everybody, it seems like lots of people know the story. So I was absolutely floored as to what came on, but you told it with such aplomb that that was exactly what should have happened. Only one tiny thing, you say okay sometimes, and it was just a little bit of because the story's so old and okay is so modern. But it was astounding. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It really was astounding. Beatrice, I'm going to go to Harvey first, and then I'm coming to you, okay? Harvey, you had a comment.
Well, I didn't know the story either, but someone commented before about how when you tell a story well, the storyteller gets lost in terms of who that they're part of the storytelling, and I was so lost in your story and involved in it that it was incredible. I mean, it was a very powerful piece, but it was also one that, I can't give you any criticism on how you told it because I was so focused on the way you told it. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you. And Beatrice, you had a comment as well. And then Lona.
You brought that ancient image and story so alive. That was an absolute thrill. And I've known about that story and known the story for years, but it was amazingly immediate in your telling.
Yeah.
The one thing I remember in Diane Wolfstein's book called The Descent of the Goddess, there's a beautiful section in the beginning where you really feel the sensuality and the pleasure and the richness of Inanna's life. And I would just add that in, and her passion for Dumuzi and the unbelievable eroticism, so that it makes more sense to me than the sister's jealous because she's lost her husband. And she's lost her husband, as I remember, to her sister. Is that possible? I can't remember, but I need to look back at it. Anyway, it was extraordinary. And just that one emotional dynamic would be helpful. But brava, really brava. Thank you.
And thank you for your comment, Beatrice. You're right. It is quite an outstanding story that has no comparison. And Diane Wolkstein's version, by the way, is directly translated from
It's
the
called
original.
Descent.
It's directly translated from the original cuneiform, and it's called The Descent of Inanna. Look for it. It's worth reading for historical purposes, at least. Mona, you had a comment.
Yeah, this is a
No, we're having trouble hearing you again.
I don't know. Let's try this. Is that better?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hallelujah. Okay, there. That's what happened. I have really, really enjoyed all of the stories today, and I love the difference in, the different countries on the phrasing and such that comes through. For instance, Baya or Baya? Which do I say, Baya or Baya? Anyway, when you were telling your story, Baya, when you were telling your story, I love the terrified she was. It's just a difference in the language from different countries. And so I just want to say, I find all of the stories very intriguing, partially because of the different tones and, differences from, in English in so many different countries. Does that make sense?
What a really good point. Yes. Different styles of speaking, different phrases. Yes, Tim.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that it's such a powerful story. It kind of really pulls you into the depths of not just the underworld, but your thoughts and your experience. And I really enjoyed listening to it. There was one thing because of that, and that I wanted to have a little bit less humanizing of the gods into the way that they were talking got sometimes a little bit too sort of informal, human, chatty kind of language. So I can't remember who just mentioned that it was saying okay was a little bit jarring, and for me the very kind of chatty informal language kind of pulls me out of that very deep place of the gods and more into a human imagination for a few moments. So I'd like to see a bit less kind of intensity of the sociable type of speaking there. A little bit more gravitas in those moments, simply because the story is just so full of that.
Thank you, Tim. I think that's absolutely a worthy comment. What I found myself was that I was listening so closely to every single word you said, Bea, that sometimes at the most intense points of the story, you would be speaking very, 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 very quickly because it was that intense. And I was leaning towards the screen, trying to hear every single beautiful word. So I just ask that, and it may be partially a trick of talking to people who have a different usage or a different dialect. But I would love to just have that really intense part slowed down just a hair so I can just love every word. Do we have any other comments? Yes, Jim. Both hands.
Yes, two comments. No, I again very much appreciate the story. I think when we hear a story from such a radically different culture, because 5,000 years ago it's radically different, There are surprises in the plot that haven't persisted into the way we tend to tell stories, and so those are important, I think, to appreciate, as you did. Her murder there early on is an important point for many reasons. My one suggestion is that it's such a large and rich story that as you decide what piece of it you're going to tell or what slice of it you're going to tell, to have the lesson that you're trying to give us, what your gift is out of it, present throughout, rather than trying to keep it complete. Because there's no way in 10 minutes you're going to be able to tell this story. So if you know that change at the end, how she came out differently than she went in, which I thought was your appropriate gift. I would want to see more emphasis on the entering so that we appreciate that on the leaving, because you can't do it all. But I very much appreciate this story. Thank you. Hope you're still muted.
You wish you could do that all the time, don't you, Jim? I know. Yada, yada, yada. No, I think that what we've really landed in this morning is one of those marvelous moments where you get a whole bunch of storytellers together, and somehow the story tells all the different stories, rich as they are individually, all seem to resonate some way at some visceral level that we will all carry with us. One of the reasons I love this group. Let me mention to you that we do have, shock of shocks, we do have a few extra minutes. I don't have any in the wings tellers who were able to make it to this meeting. So I'm going to, yes, I'll come back to you in just a second, Michelle. I know you have a comment. But since we have a little extra time, after Michelle's comment, think if you have a very brief story that you'd like to end our meeting with and that you would be willing to share. Now, while you're thinking of that, let me come back around and go down to Michelle who had a comment.
Oh, thank you, Hope. I just wanted to put together a couple of the pieces that Tim and Jim mentioned about for Bea's wonderful story. For me, the body of the story was from what she left behind, what she dropped from the beginning to the end. And so if we had less of the human chatter, but more of the body, which was what she was purging, what she was letting go. So you had me when you were talking about the first level, the first gate of the 7 gates she went through. She let go of the cloak, which was, I can't recall, was it the light or something? And then you just dropped into, and then she went through the other 6 gates. And I wanted to hear what were those other things that she let go of. And that was part of the gift that Jim mentioned. So I was like, well, what are the other parts she let go of? So for me, it would have been wonderful to say, okay, that would have been, I don't know, 60%, 65% of the story would be what is it she let go of? Because that's the lesson for me, because that was just so powerful. And that was more of the gods of the bigger story. So, but I love the story. It reminded me, I don't know a lot of stories, but I did hear once, and could have been off this one, where it was with the seasons. So I don't know if it was from this series, The Descent of Asana. So how we changed the seasons, and it was the husband that, anyway, but it was wonderful. So thank you.
And thank you, Michelle, for your comment. Chris, very briefly.
We've said a lot of things about this story, Bea, and I think one of the things I'm hearing is that there's so much of this story, it was really hard for you to get it down to 10 minutes and maybe take all of these comments. But do you usually tell more of this when you perform it?
Oh, I run a whole day workshop on it. It takes a whole day to live the story. At Samhain, the 31st of October, I run a workshop where we do it the whole day. That story is incredibly complex, and it's deeply meaningful. The reason I didn't tell it, it would have taken me the whole hour to tell it. It's very complicated, and and each bit fragment that she lets go of is deeply significant. So for me, the way I told it was because I wanted to have this transformation between somebody who goes from the light into the darkness and back into the light, and how going through the darkness changes you. That was my message. I think that was my teaching for this particular occasion.
Thank you so much.
We are grateful to hear a version of this enormously rich and deep story that allows us all to hear it, even if we haven't read Diane Walkstein's translation. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I've noticed we have an offer or two for a quick story to end with. And with apologies to Lona, I'm going to say, Rebecca, we haven't heard from you, and we're glad that you've joined us. Would you tell us a story?
Thank you. I just thought I'd sit down properly because I've been lounging and just sort of absorbing all these beautiful stories. I need to sit properly. So I think it's quite an interesting story. It's a Sufi story about light and darkness, and it's maybe another view compared to Baya's story. So I think it can be quite interesting, and it's very short. So there was this cave that lived deep, deep, deep inside the earth. And so this cave had only ever known darkness. It had heard of something called light, but it had no idea what it was, what it felt like. And one day it decided to go and discover what light was. And because this is a story, and anything can happen when the cave went on a journey to find light. And so it started traveling up and up and up and up through the earth, and it got to the surface of the earth, and it couldn't believe what it was seeing, all these colors and this brightness and light, and it marveled at what it was seeing. And a little bird passed by and said, "What are you so happy about?" And the cave explained, "Well, I had never seen light. All these colors, we don't have that down where I live, deep inside the earth." And the bird said, "Well, if you like this, don't stop here. Continue your journey and go and see the sun. Go to the source of light." And the cave said, "Okay, do I just keep going up?" And the bird said, "Yeah." So the cave continued its journey up and up and up through the skies, and it reached the sun. And the cave said, "Well, there are no words. I can't even see where I finish and where you begin." It said to the sun, it was so bedazzled, it just couldn't speak. And it said to the sun, "And you live here all the time in this light, in this brightness?" And the sun said, "Yeah." And the cave said, "But I'm going to have to go back to where I belong now. But it's always good to discover new things. So if ever you want to find out and see and feel darkness, well, come and visit me. You'll be welcome anytime you like." And the sun said, "Okay." And the cave went back down to its place deep inside the earth. And a long time after that, the sun one day thought, what about that darkness? I'll go and find out what it is. And so the sun started its journey down and down and down, and it reached the surface of the earth, and it continued its journey down, and it found the cave. And it stepped into the cave, and it looked around and looked into one corner and looked into the other corner, up and down, and a bit confused said, "So where is the darkness?"
Yes, I love it. Oh, Rebecca, where does that one come from? I love it.
It's a Sufi story. It's one of my favorite stories. I like to finish a session with this, or yeah.
I love it. I love it. Do we have any comments? Yes, Chris. And then I'll come to you, Beatrice.
Perfect to follow the story of Inanna.
I know.
We couldn't, Hope, you and I couldn't have done a more remarkable job of putting stories together for a meeting of a bunch of storytellers. This was incredible set of pieces.
Oh,
Thank you
yes.
all. It's marvelous.
I second the motion.
Dare I say, dare I say, this was most enlightening. Think of all the contrasts together. I'm sorry, but it really was hard to resist that
Yes.
phrase. But really, the here and there, the up and down, the dark and light. What a perfect topic. Thank you. Wow, what a morning. All of you.
I agree. Yes, Jim.
I loved it. I'm particularly drawn to those stories, and if you have any more detail on its source, I would love to know. Sufi is a big bucket, but
and that brings up a very good point. If you do have the source, the reference for the source of the story, please do be so kind as to put it in the chat so others can search it out and enjoy it and bring it home to themselves too. Yes, Rebecca, you were going to speak?
No, I just said I don't at the moment. I'm still trying to find some. I think I found it on internet a very long time ago and saw it once or twice in different, and I just can't seem to find it anymore. It's very strange, you know. It's one of those stories that appears and disappears, and you just have it.
And I just have to comment. My daughter right now is in labor. And so the notion of the cave getting ready to emerge is particularly resonant. So.
Congratulations, Grandpa.
Well, you know, soon. We don't know how soon.
Soon. Lona, you had a comment as well.
I found it.
Yay.
I found the story.
Oh, yes.
So I'll post it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it.
The sun in the cave.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. And thank you for posting it so that we can all enjoy it. Because that's a story that's going to, I don't think there was a story today that isn't going to stick with us, for heaven's sakes. Let me mention again to all of you that our next meeting, however, will be on July 4th. And that may not be significant for some of you, but for us it is Independence Day. So it will be interesting to see who turns up. So come and celebrate our independence and also come and celebrate our theme, which is community. And I think we are a perfect example of community. Please be sure to post comments on the Facebook page so the tellers can appreciate the fact that you really, each one of you tellers made a difference today. Thank you. I'm going to close the meeting right now and say thank you to all of you. And Chris and Jim and I will probably stay on screen just to sort of figure out what just happened. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye. Nice to meet you all.
Likewise.
Bye. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye all.
Bye all.